Listen for what comes back. A microphone sends sound to a speaker. The room returns a louder signal. A thermostat reads the cold and pushes heat back. Predator and prey curves chase because each population returns into the other. A bubble rises when price becomes a signal for more buying, then falls when fear returns through the same path. 4 surfaces, 1 structure. The result is not the end. It comes back and the system changes because of the return. We often picture cause as a straight line. X causes Y heat warms a room. Sound enters a microphone. Price rises. That picture names the first push, but it stops too early. It cannot explain why the room settles, why the squeal grows, or why curves begin to chase. Those behaviors start after Y exists. The missing question is simple. What does Y send back? Feedback begins when Y comes back. X changes Y, then Y changes X output becomes new input. The return path is not decoration. It is the mechanism that changes the whole behavior. Once the line bends back, the drawing stops being a chain and becomes a system. The later state becomes information, pressure, and the next reason the system moves. That returning consequence is what a straight line cannot carry. Every loop has a state, a temperature, a glucose level, a population, a price, or a sound level. Some part of the system senses that state. A response follows. The response acts on the world, then the changed state is sensed again. State, sensor, response, action, state again. This grammar works whether the sensor is electronic, chemical, ecological, or social. A thermostat measures temperature. The pancreas detects glucose. Predators respond to available food. Traders respond to price and attention. The names change, but the loop grammar stays readable. The first basic loop is reinforcing feedback. More X creates more Y, and more Y creates more X. A snowball gets larger, so it collects more snow, so it gets larger again. This is often called positive feedback, but positive does not mean good. It means reinforcing. Reinforcing loops can create growth, escalation, panic, viral spread, and runaway instability. They do not automatically explode forever because other loops or limits may arrive later. But while the reinforcing loop dominates, each pass around the loop makes the next pass stronger. The second basic loop is balancing feedback. The system detects a deviation and acts against it. Too cold, heat more. Too hot, heat less. Too much glucose, lower it. Too little, raise it. Negative feedback does not mean bad, it means corrective. Balancing loops need some comparison, even if it is simple. The system must have a target, a range, a constraint, or a condition it pushes back toward. The important movement is against the deviation. The return path carries correction. The loop is a correction engine, not a label. Start with the cleanest control loop. The room has a target, 20 degrees. The current temperature is 17. The room is too cold. That difference is the error. The thermostat does not need to understand winter. It only compares state with target. That error is not a moral failure. It is useful information. The thermostat sees a gap between the measured state and the preferred state, and the size of that gap tells the system how strongly to respond. The response is simple. Turn the heater on. Heat enters the room and the temperature rises. As it rises, the error shrinks. Near the target, the heater turns down. The room temperature causes the heater response. The heater response changes the room temperature. The changed room temperature causes the next response. Notice the circular causality. Cold air does not simply cause heat. Cold air causes a measurement. The measurement causes a response, and the response changes the air that will be measured next. The loop narrows the error because every return gives the controller fresher information. The mechanism is the repeated comparison. Measure, act, measure again, then reduce the action. A good thermostat does not make temperature perfectly still. It keeps it inside a controlled band. Stability is not the absence of motion. It is controlled correction. The wobble matters. Real control lives inside tolerances, not on a perfect line. Body is full of loops like this. After a meal, glucose enters the blood and the level rises. The pancreas detects the rise. It releases insulin. This is not a switch floating outside the body. It is the body measuring its own changing state. The example is simplified, but the structure is the teaching point. A biological system can keep itself within a workable range because parts of it are continually reading the consequences of earlier action. Insulin signals cells to absorb glucose. As cells take glucose from the blood, the level falls toward a healthy band. Again, the changed state becomes new information. High glucose produces a response. The response lowers glucose. Lower glucose then reduces the response. If the response were frozen at full strength, glucose would be driven too low. If the response never arrived, glucose would remain too high. Healthy regulation depends on the response fading as the state returns toward range. The output has to come back as updated input. The important picture is not a single hormone shot. It is the updating signal returning through the body. Homeostasis is not stillness. The line rises, falls, and is brought back inside a range. A living body is not a statue. It is a controlled system. The healthy band is not a finish line. It is a zone the loop keeps revisiting. Now remove the target, remove the correcting logic, keep the return path and amplification. A small sound enters a microphone. The microphone sends it to an amplifier. The amplifier sends a louder version to the speaker. There is no target temperature here, no healthy range, and no corrective intelligence. The system still has a sensor and an action path, but the action is boost. That single difference changes the behavior. Some of that speaker sound reaches the microphone again. Now the input is larger. The amplifier boosts it again. The speaker sends it back again. Each cycle makes the signal stronger. The microphone alone is not the cause. The speaker alone is not the cause. The loop creates the squeal. This is why feedback squeal can feel sudden. The first signal may be tiny, but the loop does not care where it began. It only receives the new input, boosts it, and sends it around again. The visible return arrow is the danger. If the path is open and the gain is high, the room becomes part of the circuit, not just the setting. This is positive feedback, not good feedback, reinforcing feedback. The sound is not merely traveling from microphone to speaker. It is returning from speaker to microphone. The system is feeding itself. Use the word positive carefully. Here it describes sign, not value. Reinforcing feedback also explains early population growth. More organisms can produce more births. More births create more organisms. More organisms create still more births. At first, the curve bends upward because growth is feeding on its own result. If every generation creates more potential parents for the next generation, the system is not adding the same amount each time. It is multiplying from the size it already reached. That is why the graph bends upward instead of forming a straight ramp. Growth is using its own past size as fuel. Real systems usually have limits. Food, space, and water are finite. As population grows, resources per organism fall and crowding rises. A second loop appears. More population creates more resource pressure, and more resource pressure reduces growth. The curve bends when the opposing loop becomes strong enough. The balancing loop may be invisible at first because resources are still abundant. As crowding increases, the balancing loop gets stronger. The shape of the curve is the history of which loop is dominant at each moment. The limit does not need to appear early. It matters when the growing loop makes it visible. The lesson is not that every population must collapse. The lesson is that growth rarely acts alone. A reinforcing loop can dominate early. A balancing loop can dominate later. The question is not just how fast the reinforcing loop grows. It is what pushes back. Now add delay. When prey are abundant, predators have more food. More food can allow more predators to survive and reproduce, but predator numbers do not rise instantly. Reproduction takes time, so the prey may already be high before the predator curve catches up. Delay makes feedback harder to intuit because the cause and the visible result are separated in time. By the time the predator population responds to abundant prey, the prey population may already be moving toward the next part of the cycle. Then predators become abundant. More predators eat more prey and the prey population falls, but predator numbers do not fall instantly either. For a while, predators remain high while prey are already declining. Food becomes scarce, predators fall. With fewer predators, prey recover. The predator curve chases the prey curve. The lag is the lesson. The prey curve does not wait politely for predators to adjust, and predators do not vanish the instant prey decline. Each population is partly responding to an earlier version of the other. That timing is enough to turn regulation into a repeated swing. The curves teach timing. Each side is reacting to information that is already partly old by the time it arrives. That is why the chase stays alive on the graph. This is why feedback diagrams need time. A static loop tells you who affects whom. A moving graph tells you when the effect arrives. If correction arrives late, the system can cross the target before the response lands. Then the correction becomes a new disturbance. Think of a driver steering a car with a slow video feed. The steering may be corrective in intention, but the information is old. By the time the correction appears, the car may have crossed the lane center, so the correction now pushes too far the other way. The loop has memory, and memory can arrive late. That is oscillation in one line, correction plus delay plus overshoot. The loop is trying to regulate, but timing changes the result. A good loop diagram names the return path. A good systems explanation also asks how late it arrives. The timing is the mechanism. Now consider a human system. A real market is not a toy. It includes institutions, credit, regulation, incentives, liquidity, and many other forces. This is not a complete theory of markets. It is a simplified visual model of one feedback mechanism. Keeping the model narrow is important. Feedback does not replace all other market explanations. It gives us one mechanism to watch. The moment a visible result becomes a cause of more of the same result. Price begins to rise. The rise attracts attention. Attention brings in more buyers. Buying pressure pushes the price higher. The higher price attracts more attention. Price is no longer only a result, it becomes a cause. The signal becomes part of the engine. The chart is now doing double duty. It records what happened, but it also changes what people believe is happening. When enough agents respond to the signal itself, the signal becomes part of the machine that moves the signal. The narrowing claim is important. The model shows a feedback channel, not every force in the market inside the channel. Reinforcing loops can reverse. If enough people begin to doubt the price, selling starts. Selling pushes the price down. The falling price creates fear. Fear creates more selling. The same loop structure that amplified confidence can amplify panic. The reversal is not a new kind of causality. It is still feedback. The sign has changed. Falling price can create fear. Fear can create selling, and selling can create more falling price. The return path has become a cascade path. Keep the same return arrow in mind so the reversal feels structural, not magical. The loop is still returning. In a bubble, the system is not only responding to outside value, it is responding to its own movement. The system reacts to the world it helped create. Mechanistically, that is the warning. Self-reference can amplify confidence or panic. That caveat keeps the model honest. Put the examples side by side. The microphone amplifies, the thermostat stabilizes, the predator-prey system oscillates, population growth bends when limits appear, the glucose system regulates, the bubble rises and can collapse. The surface examples are different, but underneath them is the same structural idea: output returns as input. This is the master board. In each corner, the surface story changes, but the central sentence does not. The effect returns as a new input. Once you can see that return, you can ask what kind of loop it is and what else is shaping it. This is why the film keeps returning to the same arrow. It is not decoration, it is the diagnostic tool. Read the behavior by reading what returns first. Loop can reinforce change. A loop can correct change. A loop with delay can oscillate. A loop with limits can bend, saturate, or collapse. The behavior depends on loop sign, delay, strength, limits, thresholds, saturation, and noise. Loop sign tells you whether the return reinforces or corrects. Delay tells you when the return arrives. Strength tells you how hard it pushes. Limits tell you when the old behavior must bend. Those factors turn one structure into many behaviors. Feedback destroys simple one-way causality. In a straight chain, cause comes before effect. In a loop, today's effect becomes tomorrow's cause. So when a system surprises you, do not only look for the first cause, look for the return path. Ask what comes back. Ask what is being measured. Ask what is responding. Ask what is changing. Then ask whether the changed result is feeding the next round. That question is the hidden return path. That is the portable test.